just want to say that time thing makes sense, in relation to my son. He's constantly down to the last minute. You know, I get anxious of how last minute everything is. He would be saying, "What's the time now? Oh, I've still got 4 minutes. What's the time now? I've still got 3 minutes." And I can feel myself amping up, thinking, "You've got 3 minutes, pick up the pace or something." But to him, he's like, as long as he's within that 3 minutes, even down to the last minute, he's still on time. And
Yes,
then
absolutely.
afterwards, if he
Yep.
doesn't make those 3 minutes, then he's really hard on himself. Yeah, really.
It is really dysregulated. Like it really is. For me, this has been probably the hardest part of it to deal with in my life. I have, all of the areas tick the box, but this one in particular, because it is so hard to explain to people who understand time what it's like to not get it. Like it it is just so it was so I have to tell you, like, it was so comforting to read that, because that is literally what it feels like. It feels like inside the brain, like, I know it's not moving, I know that the dial is not ticking off time the way that it does in actual life. And that is precisely the experience that I've always had. Is like, I don't when somebody like myself and many of my clients say, like, I don't know where the time went, we mean it. Like, I don't know where it went. And so imagine trying to predict how to fit your actions into time when time makes no sense to you. So it's like, it's a wild guess. The idea of, like, what can I get done in an hour? I don't know. Like, I have to really rely on, like, I know that it takes me 12 minutes to drive to the dance studio, so I have to, like, do my math. So there's certain things like that. Like, I know that I do have to leave. Like, I can do math, so I know how to do the math of, like, get my kids there on time. But the idea of, like, if I add in, then, like, I've got to pick another kid up, and then I got to drive through to get them something to eat, and then I, like, fuck that. Like, I can't, my brain is just like, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to take 2 hours or 20 minutes. And I don't know how to reverse engineer it to make it all make sense. So it's really, like, it's really, really tricky to work with that with somebody. And of course, you have to still operate in this world, right? Like, the plane is not going to wait for me just because I can't figure this out, right? My client, clearly, sometimes you can do it, but you can do it with urgency. Right. So you can actually, like I said, you weren't here last week, but what's fascinating is, with urgency, with a high enough level of dopamine, bam, all that stuff is available to you. So all of a sudden, your brain does work. The executive functioning, all of that stuff is working because it has a high enough level of dopamine to get all of that to work. But you can't, that's why you end up living your life in this state of, like, urgency and crisis, and that's why it's so chaotic. Is that, like, you wait until, like, when I know that, like, holy crap, now I'm in it and I'm actually late, all of a sudden everything opens up, and you get that frustrating, like, why didn't I just do this 20 minutes ago? Because you couldn't 20 minutes ago, because you didn't have enough urgency to create that big rush that allowed you to actually operate your own brain in a way where it makes sense. So it's very, very, very tricky to work this out in terms of not feeling like a total jackass all the time.
So it's like the reverse engineering. It's not there. It's just not.
It's there, but it has to come logically. Like, you can't experience it. You have to work it out. Like, if I sat down with a pencil and a paper and wrote down, like, how many minutes something is going to take and all that kind of stuff, then of course I could figure it out, right? If I just, like, sat still for a while and was like, okay, it's probably going to take 6 minutes, and then the drive through might take, that sort of thing. Like, I could work it out, but I couldn't experience it, right? So if I watch a neurotypical person do this, they'll be like, I watch, like, the other person who does the carpool, who's like, okay, well, I'll have to pick them up here, I'll have to pick it, and they can just sort of do it in their head in live time. And it's fairly accurate, right? Their prediction is fairly accurate. So whatever that is the piece that I can't make sense of. So it's just, yeah, the experience of it. It's really a matter of when you can't experience it, you just have to do it also differently. And if you don't know that that's what's happening, you just feel like a jackass and you get really defensive or resistant or, like all of those things around it, which is again why I think the relief is in realizing like, okay, there are ways to manage this, but you do have to manage it for what it is and not just feel like you're just less good at doing what everybody else is doing. You're doing a different thing. That makes sense? I mean, I don't know if it makes sense. Huh.
Okay, so brilliant, by the way. Thank you. um, but I think this last conversation triggered a memory for me. So going back many, many years, I was a coach working in a company, and I was in a meeting, and it was really funny because there I was sitting. We had all come to some understanding, but the sorry, forgive my voice. The leader, he wasn't with us. And he was talking out loud and he's repeating every single point that we already knew. And in the process of saying it out loud, he got there.
Huh.
And
Yeah.
I pointed this out after the meeting to my colleague saying, so we were already there, but he had to talk his way to catch
Yeah.
up to us. But he had to say it out loud.
Yep.
He couldn't just think his way there. And here's the thing that like 20 years ago, it did not sit well with me, but I never forgot this. And now I'm asking you, which was someone said, oh, that's the difference between introverts and extroverts. I'm like, no, it's not. That is not what introverts and extroverts do. Right.
Nope.
But my friend, it is not understanding science kind of ways said, no, extroverts think by talking out loud. And I said, that is literally not what an extrovert does. Right. But that definition both never sat well with me, but I couldn't find a better answer. And I'm wondering now, asking you, is this part of the
Yeah.
neuroarchitecture that
Yeah.
we're looking at here? Is that someone who can't think through a problem in their head has to learn by doing it, has to say it out loud? Does that pattern sort of fit?
Yeah, because it would be a matter of actually getting enough charge to it, right? So it still comes down to this sort of dopamine level. So when you're sitting there by yourself and you're just thinking about something, this is why people with ADHD very often present and perform really well, but are crap at preparing, right? So they will procrastinate so long, and then to everyone else it looks like they're going to like crap the bed, but they actually get up and present, and they present really well. And often that's happening because the talking out loud, the actual speaking it, that like is creating for them what they need to be able to keep those dopamine levels high enough to keep the thoughts organized, right? So the disorganization that happens in the absence of that, they literally can't stay focused and then get bored with their own process of thinking. Like their own process is too distracted to keep their interest. And without interest, the brain can't stay focused. So when they actually start to talk out loud, and especially talk to an audience, they now have that charge. So they have like the urgency, they have the impending need to stay focused. It's not going to happen like this for everybody. There's going to be certain people that have like a different sort of like stratified way that the ADHD sits, and they may clam up. Like they may actually not, or they may have other things going on interfering with it or whatever. But for a lot of people, this is how it's going to operate for them, is that by actually getting into sort of like a performance of it, they get all the chemistry they need to get their brain activated in a way that they can't do it if they don't have that process going on. So again, like it's really unique to the person, but that need, however they get their dopamine up, is across the board. That's how they're going to get their best results.
Okay, thank you.
It's really interesting.
And Tara, how to get that dopamine? Because sometimes, like, I plan it so well, like, oh, next day, and I'm excited in the evening, and next day comes, and the morning is good. After breakfast, everything falls apart. I lose that time, and then afternoon I'm like, okay, well, what have I done until now? And it's terrible. Then I feel so bad. And talking out
Yeah.
loud helps me sometimes,
Hmm.
but sometimes I'm just lazy to talk out loud. And when I talk, it's like, Mira, okay, get your this together. Okay, let's do it. Like almost like taking a kid by hand and walking through the things that I have to do. And sometimes it's just stubbornness. And I thought this is like a patterns that ingrained in me. And I have to deal with those patterns.
Yeah, and this is where I think like a good ADHD coach, that is precisely what you would figure out. So what you would figure out is what are the things like how can you get the least leverage and willpower with the most dopamine hit and figure out different ways that you can actually do that. So what you're doing right now, like when it feels like you have to lead yourself like a child with like urging and all that kind of stuff and reprimand, and that's the crap. Like that's the thing you don't want to have to be doing. That's sort of what we've mostly done our whole lives to try and cope is like either we rely on other people to treat us that way. So very often people with ADHD, and we're going to go down this road, but like will end up in relationship with people who do that for them because that is literally how they survive is like I mean like when you think again this is this whole like I get all self-obsessed here but like I remember my best friend joking that like she would hold my hand crossing the street because she thought I was going to get hit by a car. Like she was just, and it was this funny thing where I was like, well, because once we're talking, I knew that she would do that. Like I literally knew that she was going to keep me safe on the street, like from getting hit by a car, or like walking into somebody or whatever, because my mind would go into the conversation and I could give that over to her. And again, at the time, it was just like this funny, because I was like the absent-minded professor. I could, and now realizing that like that was just an easier role for me to be in was like let the people who do the responsible thinking do the responsible thinking. I am much better to be led around because the things that I don't care about. Like they're just things that I don't have any pride or invested. I'm not really interested in like, and it can be something like literally looking around to see like what's on the streets and the sidewalks and stuff. That can literally be less interesting than the thing that is filling me with dopamine, which is like the content of my conversation. My sister and I, who's here, is she or she is? We used to lose the grocery cart at the grocery store on the regular because we would like get into a conversation and then we'd start walking down the aisle and we'd get stuff and we'd look at each other and be like, where's our grocery cart? Because it just became uninteresting. Like we literally could not keep ourselves focused enough. It's my sister laughing on the grocery cart to keep our attention on it, and we would lose it. Like it was, again, we were in our 20s. We didn't care. We were like, it was hilarious. But understanding now that like that was a really serious pattern that was happening. And so yeah, you'll find people will either like have learned to lead themselves around like a child or sometimes end up in these relationships where they get treated like a child and it works for a while until they get into their mid 40s and then they get menopausal and then they're like hey you know which truly I think has a lot to do with a lot of women who reach a age where the dynamics all change. But yeah, so I would say, Mira, if you could find a way where you learn, like literally just sort of like create these lists of like, here's places where I get really, really great shots of dopamine, this particular activity, this activity, this activity, and give yourself permission to do that first. Like start your day with that before you do a task. Have like a 10-minute thing that you do that actually raises your dopamine, that is easy for you to do, that you don't have to force yourself to do and then do the task after, rather than beating yourself up for an hour for not starting the task, but you're doing like distracty things, yucky things, because you're kind of mad at yourself and you're not going to let yourself do the thing that is full of dopamine. But again, you'll have to learn your limit of like not letting yourself go over the deep end and get flooded and then you never get to the task. But just filling yourself with dopamine. So that to me is like probably one of the greatest uses of an ADHD coach would be to figure that out for you so you can start enjoying your life more and stop feeling like you're forcing yourself all the time to do things.
Thank you. And yes, when you talked about someone else, like I have to ask my husband to remember things because I will forget. And I feel
Mhm.
like irresponsible. It's like, how did you forget that? I'm like, you got to remind me that. So, but it's not a good feeling to be like a child and have your husband to remind you of things. So that's,
Yeah, and you're right. Like it doesn't feel good. But again, what I'm also learning right now with my own clients is like any one of us who feels this way has a list of things that make us feel like we are children, like really, truly. I mean, really feel like children. However, what's really, really important for the people that I'm working with right now and for myself is like make the list of where you're a genius. Make the list of where you are exceptionally talented. There are things that I can do that not a lot of people can. I know I'm in the upper strata of people that can pull them off. Like there's a lot of things that I can do because of this as well. And not just because of the ADHD, but just because of who we are as human beings. We each have, and make sure that like, so you ask your husband to remember, whatever for you, because you're not going to, but make the list of things that your husband relies on you to do because he's poop at them or doesn't care about them or whatever.
sure.
And you're the one that, and I think that because we tend to live in extremes, right? Because we're living in these emotional extremes and because we're living it is actually more important for somebody who is not neurotypical to be able to have those accessible so that you don't feel like a tool, so that you don't feel like you're constantly making mistakes or forgetting or, behind the eight ball all the time. Remind yourself. And I'm working right now. I have one client that I'm working with, and we're building a list so that she can actually use this list for sources of dopamine and to feel better about herself. So it would
Mm.
be very useful to have that. Okay. Anybody else got anything? I still haven't read the comments.
Just circling back to a question that I asked in the chat, other than timeline elicitation, what questions would you ask a client to quickly assess their relationship with time? Because I imagine in the conversation, some things might come up that give you an indication early on, but I'm just curious if there are any specific questions or ways of applying techniques that you would figure that out.
Yep. So using IRs, like just using internal representation and actually getting like a image. So I find it really, really helpful to get somebody to go out to you have to know your client well. So if I know my client is somebody who has a lot of trauma potentially, or they're like just going to drop into something really emotional, then you're going to have to use, mild to medium emotions. But if you've got a client who's pretty resilient and who can manage emotions well, I actually use something that's a little bit more severe because I want to see the impact of it. And then, do you guys remember? Some of you might remember when I did the exercise of like trying on different emotions. So you would you get your client to imagine themselves in a scenario just for flexibility of the mind. So you have your client imagine themselves like going to the market, and I have my client like close their eyes, imagine walking into the market and the cash register, they get up to the cash register and they just let loose with anger and rage and they scream and they yell, and I have them just imagine, and I always have to urge them to be like, this is not real, it's okay, you can do this, it's just in your head, you're not really hurting anyone anyway. But have them imagine what it would be like if they were to unload on the cash register. Then I have them go back to that moment and say, okay, now imagine you just start to cry. Like you just weep and cry and you just like fall to pieces in your whole body, and have them imagine that. Then have them imagine being full of gratitude, just overwhelming gratitude and appreciation for the cashier. Then have them be like really, really embarrassed, and then have it. So I have them walk through like a whole cascade of emotions in a bunch of different scenarios and like different situations, because the brain so often tricks us into believing that we only have one choice. So it believes that like if X happens, how could you react other than embarrassed? When someone says this to me, how could you be anything but angry? Well, truth is, at any point, you could be anything. You get this flexibility. So if a person can do that really well, then you can actually start, not really well. By really well, all I mean is that it's a good way to loosen them up, to get the person to start in a really, really a way that isn't going to cause any harm. It gets the mind to realize that they're just imagining it, that it's not real, that it's not going to like hurt or damage or whatever. And then I bring a fairly extreme emotion out into the future. And I will bring them to like, imagine tomorrow something really, really hard happens. And I have them actually look at themselves tomorrow. And on like a scale of 0 to 10, how upset does it make you to think about this happening to you tomorrow? And they'll give me a response. Then I have them go out a week from now. Imagine the you a week from now having something really, terrible happening. And they go out, and then I go out 3 months, and then I go out 6 months, then I'll go out a year, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years. And for most people, it will have sort of like there will be a peak somewhere. So there will actually be a version of themselves where they have the most connected reaction to, where they actually feel it the most. And it's not like you think it would be. It's not like tomorrow's higher than a week from now, or a month from now, or 3 months from now, because a lot of people will have the ability to sort of transpose their resourcefulness now to tomorrow, but they're not sure if they can 3 years from now and all that kind of stuff. And so for most of my clients in my notes, I know where their like peak felt future self is. And so some people who have trouble where they're so anxious because they're actually more identified with a future self 3 years from now or 10 years from now than they are their self right now. And then I have people like myself who have almost no relationship with their future selves. They don't like it. If you say to me, like, what if something happens 10 years from now? I don't have a very strong emotional reaction to it when I imagine it, not compared to like if it happened now. And so you can get a gauge of people's relationship to their future self that way. And it doesn't actually take, it sounds like it takes a long time. It doesn't. It takes like 5 minutes to actually sort of like go up and down, like just sort of get around their future. But it has to be somebody who can actually imagine an emotion. So that's the only caveat is like if you have somebody who can't do that. So when you say like imagine you're this way, then it's irrelevant because all they're doing is like they're just consciously they're constructing something, right? They're not actually feeling it. So that's to me that's like the most effective way to get somebody to understand their relationship with the future. The past would be the same. I just don't bother to do it in the past because that's what we spend all of our time doing when we do timeline therapy, when we do like I already know, right? So I don't bother in the past. Plus, I don't really want to do that to someone. Um, and then other than that would be like, yeah, the timeline scan. Or sorry, not the timeline scan, just eliciting the timeline. Um, I don't know if anyone can think of anything else, but usually that one works enough. Um, yeah. I have lots of other ideas, but that's the only one that I can actually really bring to mind that I've actually done and I know for sure works really well.
Awesome. And I'm curious how you work with it after that point, or if you try to shift it at all, if there's any value in that.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I discovered this trying to work with anxiety. Right.
Mm.
So the reason I actually came up with this as a technique was because I was noticing that everyone who has this like really, really, really heightened anxiety tends to have a really strong relationship with their future self. And so they're either predicting that their future self isn't going to be able to deal with whatever life handles. So it's this weird relationship where like if I say to them like how capable of you are you to handle, I don't know, like not having enough money in the bank or like whatever, even while they may believe that they could handle it today, it's like they lose faith or trust in their ability to handle it in the future. And so I was just trying to figure out what was going on with that. So the way that I would, yeah, I shifted quite a bit actually, because for people that have really high levels of anxiety, we know they're always out in the future, anticipating a negative event, believing that they can't handle the event, and then believing that they aren't going to be able to get through it, right? That it's negative and they can't handle it. And so what I would start to do would be to like I would shift the internal representations so that they could actually come back into a more connected present self so they don't keep like sacrificing their happiness and their ability to relax and be calm and all that kind of stuff in the present in order to try and protect that future self. So I would just do that using like mapping across and shifting IRs. I would even do like timeline therapy, but out in the future, right? So if you have somebody who's like super, super, super anxious about an event in the future, you actually clear it. Like I've done trauma and I've done timeline therapy out in the future on a woman who is giving birth and is so anxious about giving birth that she's literally traumatizing herself as if it's already a significant emotional event. And she's like traumatizing herself by this event that hasn't even happened yet. So I just treat it. She's obvious in her mind, it's obviously processed as though it's happened. Right? That's how she's behaving and that's how she's acting and that's what she's expecting and that's what she's anticipating. So if I then remove the trauma or the get the learnings from it and all that kind of stuff out in the future, it actually reduces the experience of it in the present. So that was how I started using it. And yes, you can definitely change that relationship.
Amazing. That's so helpful. And I honestly think that future self work and IRs are underrated.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too. Hugely, hugely. I think, yeah, a lot of coaches stop doing the future pacing a lot and really reinforcing it. And I think that's a mistake. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
And I do think, this is just a hypothesis at this point, but I do think that the ADHD stuff would be, it seems to me that you could practice and train just like you can a million other things that aren't wired naturally. Yet you can actually practice and train them. And you could, by really reinforcing future state, create a better connection to future. But I've never tried it specifically. Yeah. Okay. Anything else here that I missed? Yeah, Sarah. Yeah. The compassion. I mean, this is all you want, right? Is compassion. I am still interested, Catherine. You can't come off mute, eh? So I'm going to get Catherine to come on and talk here one of these nights about neurodiversity, and maybe she will be able to tell us then. Sally, you said my client has a tremendously difficult time managing his time. Believes if he shows up to work, he's good. He's been diagnosed. Oh, with pandas. Sally, pandas is a whole other thing. Yeah, okay. So Sally was just saying she has a client who has ADHD, but also has pandas. Wouldn't even begin to know how to. I've worked with pandas a couple of times and I have not been successful. That's what I have to say about that. Pandas is so like it's probably viral, right? Like it probably is actually caused by a virus. I don't know, Tara, you might have more to say about this than I do in terms of pandas, but I just know it is very, very difficult to work with.
I have referrals, but in Ontario for people who work with pandas.
Yeah. Have people been successful working with it?
Yeah, with naturopathic care.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and Sarah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, interesting. Sally, I would support stress with that person. I would just really, really focus on like you do with anything out of your scope, right? So like anything that anybody's coming to that is outside of your scope. So if it's something like a diagnosed pandas, or if it's like, yeah, like a cocaine addiction, or like anything that really truly you don't have the skills, nor should you responsibly be working with it, you can still work with the symptoms of the stress that it causes. Right. So that's what you want to do in this case, right? I would never, ever, ever say to a client that like I could help them with their panda symptoms, but I could say to a client, I can help you with the stress that the symptoms create in your life. And that's, always where you're going to default to with somebody that you may have really good rapport with, and they may find it really helpful to see you, but you're working with the symptoms of stress associated with their condition, not the condition itself. Not true with ADHD, though. I do think we can directly really help with that. Okay. If everyone is good, I'm gonna leave it. And please let me know. Again, what I'm thinking right now is I'm learning over these last two times that I am putting in like twice as much as I actually should into these, because I don't want to have to skip over it like I am a little bit. So I think we'll just look at the emotional stuff that goes along with it. So the emotional dysregulation and the rejection dysphoria, and all of that kind of stuff. That's what I'm going to look at next time. And I'll be doing sort of a deep dive into that this week. And I've got a couple of clients that'll give me good practice in between now and then. And if you have any ideas of anything that you would like to address in particular beyond that, please email me. I would love to hear from you guys.
Is it
And
likely to be this time again? Because this is great from New Zealand. It's like
I am doing 8 o'clock all summer long. Even if
awesome.
none of you show up anymore, I'm still going to be here at 8 o'clock every Monday this summer.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll stay really focused on ADHD the whole time. Like I said, that'll be a couple of weeks. Like I'm going to do as much as we can, but I really want to look at like neurodiversity generally. It's this whole summer sort of series is going to be looking at the contrast of what we're calling neurotypical to all of the forms of neurodiversity. So we're going to look at autism and like all sorts of stuff. But I'm definitely going to spend the next couple of weeks on ADHD. It's just so prevalent. Like it's just so prevalent. And I really, really believe that anybody who's working with anybody in this capacity should really understand, at least know how to troubleshoot it, right? You don't even necessarily need to know how to treat it so much as actually troubleshoot and know what you might be dealing with. So yes, Erin, every Monday at 8 o'clock, I'll be here. And I'll share the replay. If you ever miss it, I will share the replay with everyone.